Hey everyone, this is Nicole Watson with another Artist Gang Tuesday. Today we're making backgrounds using one of Donna's stencils and pastels. You can then turn these backgrounds into cards or leave them in your art journal. Grab your supplies and let's get started. This is a great way to use up bits and pieces of ephemera that you've been holding on to or your old rubons. Start by cutting or ripping apart your ephemera. Then use matte medium on the front and back so your paper is securely fastened to the page. You're going to make 4 card fronts from this one page, so add a variety of papers all over. It's okay to leave some white space, or you can fill those in with rubons. I like to brush a thin layer of matte medium over the whole page to make sure I didn't miss any papers. Let your page dry or use a hairdryer. The page doesn't need to be completely dry before the next step. Now add a thin layer of gesso on the page. Use water to thin it down. This helps push back some of the dark text and the yellowing old book pages. You don't have to do this step. In a minute you'll see a page that I didn't gesso. The gesso layer does need to be completely dry before adding the pastel layer. Here I'm building another background layer with ephemera, but I'm also layering it with printed tissue. I really like how this tissue layers on top of the ephemera for an additional effect. To speed up the process, you could skip the ephemera layer altogether. The card or journal page would still look great. Sometimes a simple pastel layer is all you need. Again, add a thin layer of gesso. If you get too much, you can simply wipe it back with a baby wipe. I forgot to add a few rubons for added texture on the first page, so I went back to add them. Once on the page, layer with matte medium so they are secured down and then gesso. Once the pages are really dry, you can start the pastel layer. Since I'm cutting mine apart for cards, I removed the pages from the book. Place the stencil on the bottom half of the front page. Squish the versamark ink right through the holes. This is the same step as the embossing tutorial I did last month, except we're going to use pastels instead of the embossing powder. Too much watermark ink can make the pastels harder to apply, so if you need to, just wait a few minutes before applying. Now it's time to build color on the front. I like to start light and go darker with the layers. A light first application also helps to find the stencil pattern easier. Just lightly apply pastel, and where the watermark ink is, the pastel will cling to it. Once you're happy, give it a really light spray of fixative because we're going to go back and add some more color in a little bit. Here's another page using the same limited color palette, except this time I began with yellow. I continued the same process of adding layers of color. I also like how when you add the pastel, it catches on the edges of the ephemera for another fun look to your page. When you're finished, you'll do the light spray of fixative again, flip the page, and do the other side. on this one, I didn't use the gesso before I added the pastel, and you can see how the background ephemera kind of competes more with the flower pattern on the front. They both look okay, it just depends on which version you like better, or try them both. When you're done with your stencil, be sure you clean it off. You can just use a baby wipe or soap and water to get the sticky watermark residue off of your stencil. Next, you can add some extra color using pastel pencils or sticks. Highlights, shadows, outlining, they all add another layer of interest. If you use too much fixative on the first layer, the harder pastel pencils will be more difficult to layer. That first layer of fixative should just help set the pastel so that it doesn't get messy on your art table. When you're finished, add a good layer or two of fixative. Once you're finished adding color and your pages are dry, you can begin to cut them apart for your card fronts. These are for cards that are the A2 size, or 5.5 by 4 1/4. I started by trimming just a couple millimeters or tenths of an inch off of each side so that the background of my card would show just a tiny bit. You'll see in a minute that I decided that I didn't have enough of the background showing and decided to trim them just a little bit more, and that step is coming up in just a minute. Donna has some really great stamps with fun sayings that you can send to people just because or for encouragement. These are a couple of her stamp sets that I use for the front of these cards. Now you get to be brave and stamp the front of your cards. If they turn out a little crooked, it's okay. They'll still look great because of the messy backgrounds. So now you want to stick your card fronts to your bases. I use the little foam squares, or you could use foam tape so that they pop a little from the front of the card. And here's where I also decided that I didn't like that there was only a tiny bit of the black showing, so I trimmed a little bit more off the front of each one. You can see what that looks like, so have just a little bit or a lot bit off the front of your card and decide which one you like better. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you try it out, be sure you post your cards in the Donna Downey Community Artists Facebook group. Be sure to give this a like or a thumbs up or comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks!